Okay, in the previous video I mentioned that I had an issue with being able to reach or have access to this fastener with a torque wrench. And so my solution to this little dilemma is this little guy here. It's a Motion Pro adapter, torque wrench adapter. And the way it works is that it has a slot and you can insert wrenches like so in there and then tighten things down. Just keep it in there like this. You can use the closed end. Or, in our particular case, I can put in our Torx bit like this. And I already marked it so that I get the requisite distance from the socket. I just tighten it down and we can talk about the dimensions that are critical. This is a 5mm Allen bit. Let's get this stuff tightened up so it doesn't move. So what I'm trying to accomplish here, and you can use any distance you want, whatever's convenient or works for you, and then kind of just use the formula to compensate. But in this particular case, the distance from the center of the socket for my torque wrench and the center of the face of the bit here is exactly 3 inches. 3 inches right here. Another thing I know is that for my torque wrench, the distance between the center of the head and the center of the handle is 14.5 inches. So the way the formula works is whatever the torque value you have in the manual, you multiply that torque value by the length of the torque wrench, the length of your lever, that's 14.5 inches, and divide that number by a sum of, again, the length of the torque wrench, which is 14.5, and the length of the additional lever, which is 3 inches. Usually the torque specs for these screws are between 30 and 35 pound-feet of torque. Actually, the manual for this old Dyna is lower than that, and it goes to, it actually is specifying 25 to 30. And believe it or not, I'm going to run with a lower number here, then use the formula to adjust. And so with this lower number, I'm getting 21 pound-feet of torque. Again, it's kind of low. I mean, if you want to go higher, that's fine. In the previous video, I mentioned that this fastener is lubricated. So it's very important to make sure that you adjust for that. Lubricated fasteners are a lot easier to turn. There's a lot less friction here. So if you use the actual torque that's provided in the manual, you'd probably strip the threads out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset this torque by another 30%, decrease the torque by 30%. So basically multiply whatever I'm using here, 21 pound-feet by 0.7. That gives me 14.7 pound-feet. Only about 10% of the torque that we are applying goes to stretching whatever this threaded system is and providing the clamp up. The rest is just friction. So if I have some lubrication under the head and on the threads, I'm stretching this whole system a lot more than originally contemplated. So I feel very comfortable with these lower numbers that I've been using. Anyway, so let's torque this thing down. We have to keep the bit and the wrench as parallel as we can. I'm going to set the wrench to the number that I've chosen. And if you overshoot the number, don't just back it off to that number. It's always a good idea to kind of come up on the number. So I overshot, and I'm going to go back and pull it up again to the number that I want, which is 15 pound-feet. Okay, here we go. So we really need to keep our bit centered and parallel to the axis of the fastener. And when you torque, make sure you keep your speed consistent, because the friction also depends on the speed. If you heat things up, the friction can increase. So it's a really good idea to keep things at constant speed when you torque. So notice I've only turned it maybe not even half a turn yet, and I kind of played that. We're going to hear a click pretty soon. There's the click. Some people say it's no big deal, but I like to back the torque wrench off to 0 when I'm done. What I'm going to do now, just in case, just to see, so this is a relatively short handle, it's shorter than the torque wrench. Just going to double check with my calibrated elbow. I mean, I'm certainly not trying to move this head too far. Just want to see if it'll move on me. And it really doesn't want to. So I think we're good to go.